Thank you all for joining us. We have Miss Vonciel Paul, who has joined us today for our celebration and honoring the baby boomers. And so we're just talking a little bit about the backdrop of World War II and how that affected our parents in the way that they raised us. And she's kind of going to be giving us a little bit of the scenario that affected that her parents went through during that time period. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just feel free to refer to me as Von Paul, Gloria. It's Vonciel Paul, but Von Paul for the sake of the segment to make it easier to remember. So I was born in 55, but my parents and my grandparents, after World War II in the 40s, they had been raised in the South. They come from Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, northern Florida. And in the 50s, around the time that I was born in the mid 50s, I remember, and I'm doing all this is from my memory as a child, they were eager to get out of the South, get away from the agriculture industry, and come up north to the manufacturing industry. So they moved to New Jersey and New York and Chicago and Detroit because that's where the money was.
Ah,
They could make more money. And I think psychologically they wanted to get away from the whole farm labor, slave labor type of environment. I'm
absolutely.
not sure. I'm just assuming this is why they were, because there was a big migration from the South to uh, to Detroit and Chicago and New York and areas where manufacturing became the big place to go and the most lucrative place to go. And they did really well. They had a lot of success. They were able to save money. They were able to get loans. And my family, in particular, uh, they did really well. They were able to buy their first homes, and they were able to buy their own businesses. You know, my father bought his first truck. You know, his trucking business. And so between the manufacturing and then being able to get their own truck and their whole generation of friends, they had a lot of success in the 50s. And so it's funny how things really changed from agriculture industry to more automotive industry became the big contests or the big exciting movement because there was more money and there was the whole get away from that slave trade that we've always been in as Black people. They were excited about turning that page and moving forward in a different direction, and they did. And so the 50s and 60s brought a lot of success to my parents' generation because they were making money working for those factories and they were able to save money and buy property.
So you think geography had a lot to do with that success then, huh? Where people were locating, if they left the South, they might have done a lot better. They did do a lot better than
They did a lot better because they weren't getting anywhere in the South. They weren't able to make the kind of money because the wages, I guess, were lower. And so they were eager to make more money. And I think the whole idea of working on a farm in that agriculture industry was a turnoff. So they were proud to turn that page and do something different by the 50s. Uh, so that's what they did. And so they had a lot of Black people that were able to buy homes and start their own businesses in the North.
that is
And some of them never went back south. They came north, and that's where they are to this day. Actually, ironically, that some of them started going back to the south in the 80s. But the 50s and the 60s was a big boom My grandfather worked for the airline manufacturing. My father worked for the auto manufacturing industries.
Yeah, that
Where the
is.
money was.
Now, see, that is a great perspective because I think my parents stayed in the South. Their parents actually stayed in the South. By the 50s, there were a lot of milestones that, just like you said, I think we there was as I done some of the research in preparing for this, I know that there was a lot. There was even an agriculture boom at that point. So you're exactly right. There was a lot of money being made. I think the GDP, the gross GDP that included the agriculture side of things, actually doubled during that time. And so even those that were in the South, however, they did not make the kind of money because of the oppressive nature of the system that was being made in those manufacturing industries. But those were really, I mean, that was a great move, and it certainly gives a good explanation to some of the varying backgrounds that we have inside of this country as a result of some of those things. Because I think the the whole idea of capitalism between 45 and 60, I think it more than doubled from like 200 billion to 500 billion, which just confirms what you're saying about
Yeah, yeah, I
how the
understand.
country grew because of the manufacturing and the agriculture. And of course, there was opportunities in order to magnify then and make better life for those that were. I think the SNCC, the SNCC was founded in 1960. We had Martin Luther King Jr.'s march in 63. So there was a lot that began to go on after that next generation because of all of that. That
Right.
of course, we as baby boomers, and that may have a lot to do with why they kind of describe the baby boomer generation as that counter cultural upheaval
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
1960s, because after the our parents didn't want to lose. They wanted to leave more for us than what they had, of course. And
right.
any systematic oppression that was trying to, keep that from happening, I think it makes all the sense in the world that that would be a period of upheaval if people are pushing back and trying to keep that wealth from passing.
Yeah,
Well, that
yeah.
is extraordinary. That is wonderful because I always wondered, I always knew even when I became grown that there was such a difference in significance in those that lived on the East Coast, because I grew up in the Midwest, and it's like it was such a difference in the
The
life.
way the culture was, yeah. Yeah, everything moved from the South to the Midwest and eventually in the North because of that manufacturing. And it affected the South and the agriculture industry because people had money. So they were able to buy things. They
Yes,
were able to
yes,
buy property. They were able to buy
the
food.
land.
Yeah, land. And
Land
so,
acquisition, yes,
yeah,
start. Some of them probably were able to start farming themselves.
right. Yeah. And so they had that going on. And then that was in the 50s. That big migration from the South and from agriculture to manufacturing, that happened in the 50s,
Uh-huh.
in mid 50s and late 50s. So then when the 60s came along, Motown became a big industry. The whole music industry boomed in the 60s. And then people were in the Midwest and involved with the music industry, which played a big role for Black people as far as getting some generational wealth because of the kind of money they were making because of groups like the Motown scene.
Yes, yes. How that and that was one of the greatest at that time because it was all new, but it was certainly a very solid and substantial way in which people were able to move forward.
And they were able to make a lot of money, more money than ever, more money than manufacturing. The whole music industry poured a lot of money into Black people's pockets. Not as much as they should have gotten, they got cheated, but they had a better opportunity then than they had had before.
Yes, yes, makes sense. Boy, that's awesome. That is so awesome to have had that view of growing up and the view of being on the East Coast and the opportunities and things. It's just like two different worlds.
It was different work. And then also at the 60s, after Motown and the manufacturing industry boom hit, Black people started getting became Black became beautiful, and this by the 70s, Black became beautiful. It's always beautiful to us, but the world was recognizing because they had all these groups that were so talented and they were so proud. And but unfortunately, with that being proud and that I'm Black and I'm proud, and then the civil rights movement added to that, the whole culture changed to a more proud culture. But unfortunately, at the same time in the 60s, it brought in drugs and alcohol that caused people's moral values to decay. So everything changed morally in the 60s, where in the 50s, people, I think, were more religious, more spiritual, more involved with their churches. But by the 60s, when Black people started getting into the whole music industry changed, it affected people's whole way of life as far as their church life and their morals life. And the drugs helped decay that.
Oh
And
yeah.
so all those things like Woodstock, it wasn't just Black people, but white people were affecting us too. And so that I remember that so well. And then I was very involved with things in the 70s. My father was involved with the civil rights movement. He went to Washington to march and was there when Martin Luther King did the I Had a Dream speech. I was too young. But by the time the 70s came along, I was one of the first Black women to get involved in the Miss Black America pageant. So the music
Oh,
industry allowed us to, and Black being beautiful, allowed us to branch out to identify ourselves as worthy of more than what we had been given. So I was one of the fifth. I was the generation of the fifth Miss Black America pageant participants, and I actually won for the state of New Jersey. I represented New Jersey as Miss Black America of New Jersey back in '73.
wow. Well, you know what? I've got a couple of photos that you shared with me. I want to pull those up now so that we could just take a moment to reflect on that. So let me go ahead and share. I want to
Uh,
share those photos right now. There's one right there. Let's start
okay,
with this one here. I want to share this one first. And here we go. Here's a couple of those
okay.
photos right there. So now we can put some reference to the,
Yeah, the lady in the middle with the afro, and in the center, her
yes.
name was Arnice Russell.
Okay,
She was
that's
the first Miss America. That
wow.
was in 1973.
Okay. And
And
then,
it's showing Miss North Dakota, Miss Louisiana. I I forgot. I can't see the one in the far left, but the one in the middle, the light skinned lady, was Miss Louisiana. Miss North Dakota was on the right, and in the center is the reigning queen, or the first queen of Miss Black America pageant.
oh, how wonderful that is. And so this photo, this next photo of you here, this was the day, this was the time when you were Miss New Jersey. Is that
Right.
right? Oh,
Yep. Black America of New Jersey was the official title.
Miss Black America of New Jersey. How
That
wonderful.
took place at the Latin Casino in Trenton, New Jersey. Trenton is the capital of New Jersey. So that's
How
where that started out.
wow. Now tell us a little bit about how that affected your your life going forward? What kind of opportunities, because you were able to put yourself on such a large screen or platform, were there
Right.
opportunities that came as a result of that that allowed you to venture into some other things um, in your life?
Well, yeah, because the being in even though it was a beauty pageant, it was based on talent and scholarships came with it. So all of those women who were in the pageant, some of them got scholarships to go to college, and so
Oh,
that affected a lot of people that wouldn't ordinarily have been able to go to college. Black was now beautiful. They had a Miss Black America pageant, and then they
wow.
funded that pageant with money so the women could get the education they needed so they could have a career path. So it was very helpful and very successful.
Wow, that is awesome. Well,
Yeah.
that certainly is good to know. That those are beautiful photos, and now we can share and bring real perspective to that, because I thought it was awesome when you were telling me about that, and it's like, okay, and a little bit about your one of the other things too I wanted to touch on was just a little bit about those some of the things that you did career wise, because where you were located and because of your opportunity from the Miss Black America of New Jersey pageant, there were opportunities. So talk to us a little bit about uh, some of the high points that you really got the most out of on your in your
Well,
career.
scholarships allowed me to afford to go to college. I chose and got accepted at New York University, and I got a master's degree in instructional design. And that experience literally allowed me to travel halfway around the world, training people in training people in technology, in public speaking, and just how to do their jobs. Management training and development. And so that 40 years I spent in the as a human resource trainer, corporate
Wow.
trainer. Literally traveled to Australia and Denmark and Sweden and all over Europe, Italy, training people how to do various management jobs. And so
Wow.
that's a real blessing for me personally.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is so wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing with us on that, because I think that's really what this is all about, is celebrating people like yourself, because we are, of that baby boomer generation, and we are the ones that are embarking upon retirement, but also, you know, given the presidents that are currently running for office. We've got Donald Trump, who we know, kind of grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth and probably had a lot of opportunities that don't seem to have helped to balance him as a human being. But that's another conversation altogether. Um, there were a couple of other things I did want to kind of bring out, and I was hoping that we would get a what I'm hoping to do is to get a broad enough audience that we can have some discussions with some of the other there's Native Americans that were affected deeply during that time, and to talk with some of them about what was going on during that time with them. And
Hi, my name is Tepaya. That means glory in Hebrew. We want to thank you for our next segment. The focus of this segment is called Talking Heads, Trending Truth. Let's get started.
there was something, and I wanted to pull this out because I wasn't. It was called the Marshall Plan. After World War II, there was something called the Marshall Plan that came out, and it was later called the Foreign Assistance Act, granting
Uh-huh.
$5 billion in aid to the 16 European nations, and this was during the four. It was a 4-year period where lots and lots of money was being sent to the nations, the allies that were part of World War II, which came out of the tax dollars, of course, and the money that was being raised in the United States, because it came out of the war as
Right.
one of the strongest nations. And so, in order to reestablish those other nations, it was billions of dollars that were given from that great boom in the gross domestic product of the United States to those nations. And so we know that there's talk of, how what you were saying, and how much money was actually going into the pockets of families, and how they were able to buy these homes and things like that. So it really helped
Well,
to
remember, in the Midwest, that's when Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street was established back then. Doing that was in the 60s, and so a lot came out of the growth for people, and they again establishing their own businesses until, unfortunately, evil people who were jealous that we were doing as well as we were destroyed the those industries in the neighborhood.
Yes, yes, and that and I think a lot of that, when I look back and I see, a lot of the policies that we're facing today, um, of all those years of building, and how a lot of these policies. I was listening to a show that I'm following with regard to Medicare, and we're rolling into that new open enrollment. And so there's a gentleman that is doing a lot of shows on that, and I'm going to try and focus on just spending some time piecing out parts of his show. I hope to help with some of the definitions and things that are happening with the changes that are coming down,
Right.
starting next month, actually. And so that kind of leads us segue into the next thing I kind of wanted to pull up, just the question on Medicare, the election, and then hobbies of the baby boomer generation. I know I'm closer. We're pretty close in age, and I know a lot of the Medicare questions are important because, you know, on average, we've had to work at least 40 years in order to be
Right.
eligible for the services. And then we've got this election coming up, and there's talk on both sides of the aisle with regard to what they'll be doing. And then we've got the hobbies. So let's start with some of the hobbies that um, that are important. I know that we share one that we enjoy, and that's swimming. Um, where my parents were not big swimmers; they were not big water people, and I think it was because the trauma of the whole trauma of staying in the South, staying close to where those slave ships came in. Even though a lot of them came in up there in Pennsylvania and in the places up there on the upper runs of the East Coast, but there are a lot of people swimming didn't take on. It's a lot better now, but how did you come to love swimming?
Yeah, those I don't know any black people that knew how, was taught how to swim or was interested in swimming at all. I became interested in it really because of the success that my parents had in the manufacturing industry and being able to save money. They and a lot of their friends were able to build pools. They didn't just build houses, but they actually had in-ground pools, something that was unheard of
Yeah.
uh, for Black people to have a house, let alone an in-ground pool. And so I was fortunate to come out of a family that saved up and said they wanted to do that, and they did it. And so that's how I got into to swimming. And as a matter of fact, I was in the middle of getting my lifeguard certificate when I got it in Miss Black America pageant, and because of the pageant, I never did get the certificate. It conflicted with my involvement with the pageant. So even though I learned all the strokes and was considered at that time an expert swimmer, I never took it further. I couldn't take it any further because of what happened with the pageant. It was running at the same time.
Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, that mine. I was one of the ones in my family. We had neighbors. We were some of the first. Our family was one of the first of three families that were able to. During that time, it was before redlining when I was a little girl, and there were set places in Denver that you couldn't live if you
Right.
were from the South or a black family. And so we were one of the first of three families that were able to move across the barrier, the
Yeah.
line that was set up. And we had, and so one of my best friends um, and her family happened to live across the street, and there were only three families in the neighborhood. So her dad was, and they too came, their parents, her parents were like yours. They lived on the East Coast. So they
Yeah.
had an exposure that was very different. And so they knew about swimming and everything. And we became best friends. So,
Yeah. Whenever I met anybody who could swim, a black person, I was always amazed and curious how they even came to get involved. Now today, most of the high schools have swimming courses in New Jersey, where I was raised. But I believe in Florida, of course, because the ocean, those schools also offered swimming. So that today, that's not an issue. Most people, if they want to learn, they it's a part of their curriculum.
that's so wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful because the water
Now,
is,
another hobby that was popular in New Jersey for me, that was unusual for blacks too, was ice skating. I learned to ice skate before I learned to roller skate. Roller skating, I was raised near Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey became a big booming city, and a lot of successful blacks lived there. And they were doing all kinds of hobbies like roller skating and ice skating, things that most blacks never did. But we did. I learned to ice skate before I learned to roller skate.
wow, that is so wonderful. And it's so great to hear that. I know my mom where I grew up, that my parents couldn't they were kept, my mom was kept to women could only do the servitude work in Denver at that time. So she was able to work for lawyers and cleaning their houses. And my dad worked at the foundry. And most of the black men, of course, they went to work for the foundry. So there was a real difference in those kinds of opportunities that were laid or be kept and given to people because of being in the Midwest. Um, in that area. So that's interesting.
I got a job with the federal government.
Wow.
60s. She educated herself. She went to college. She got a job with the Internal Revenue Service and retired from the Internal Revenue Service. So we've had a lot of exposure to things that a lot of blacks, especially, were not exposed to. Because one, they didn't have the education, and then some of them didn't have the money. But because of the success uh, of Newark, New Jersey, there were opportunities in New Jersey and New York, as well as Detroit and Chicago, that allow people to go to school.
How wonderful. That is so good. And but yeah, and I think about it when I think about, a lot of times um I was one of the few, actually the only one that was able to go to college and graduate in my family.
Right.
Even in such a time as you know uh, able at being at retirement now. But it's so interesting because all I that's what I thought a lot about it, but you just don't know. You have no clue what's going on in the other areas of the nation. Now I had my dad's on both my dad's side. We had relatives that were on the East Coast. I mean, very progressive book writers and teachers and really were able to take advantage of, like you said, the booming time, and then those opportunities where the capitalism was booming. It was growing, and the money and the jobs and everything were there.
But you had to have the money to be able to afford it. And it trickled down to my sister. My sister's 10 years younger than me. But she was raised in Florida. My mother uh, raised her in Pensacola, Florida. She went to Florida A&M. So she graduated from college. So it was both her, and then she followed in my footsteps and she graduated.
Oh, how wonderful, wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. Now I'm going to switch gears here. Let's go into what your thoughts are on the the I mean, because of the boomers and because of the establishment of our healthcare system and the current election. What are some of your thoughts on because we are sitting in the position of the leaders at this point in the nation and those that want to become the president? Of course, Trump is a boomer, but um, what's the young lady's name that she's? I think she's probably a Gen Z or X or one of the. She's in that next generation. And
Right.
Kamala.
Biden and Trump are baby boomers.
Yes, yes, yes.
He's a generation after, before, after that. But
Yeah,
the whole political scene is just so since um, now that we're in the Trump era, after his, it's just changed everything. There just things are so corrupt now, and so much prejudice has gotten involved that I don't know what the future holds for us as a nation, let alone as culturally, as far as Black people, because of the corruption and the prejudice. We'll see. Time will tell what's going to happen in the political arena. You
absolutely.
know,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's true, and I think the other thing too is that the generation Xers, which is that next generation behind us, uh,
right?
which is the one that Kamala Harris would be a part of. And when I haven't looked at a whole lot. I've got some fun facts on them because I want to take some time to focus on each one as we go. Um, but the I agree with you 100%. The whole political scene is one that I think is more explained. To me, it's more explained according, especially for those of us who understand prophecy. I think really the only real explanations that make sense are going to come from prophecy. Um,
Right.
I don't think that there's much that any of these generations can really lay out that would make sense about what's going on. There's a lot of distractions that Truth Unedited. That video was so good.
Yeah,
Uh,
really good.
and I just loved his advice. I kind of went down and just stopped the tape and began to write down each of those things that he was listing because I think it's so critical right now. Because if people don't understand, then they become overwhelmed. If they become overwhelmed, they become victims and fall prey to the foolishness and the distractions, and then get caught up into things that they really get caught up into some serious psychological issues. So I agree 100% that if we stay with that prophecy is the only answer. But um, okay, well, I think that those were the things I kind of wanted to touch on, and I want to say how much I appreciate having the opportunity to just discuss some of these things in a way that allows us to share our ideas and our opinions and our backgrounds, because I think it's important for people, especially when we think about the larger scale of humanity, how our parents' generation affected the way they raised us, how our generation, they just had, there's all these, uh, there's a day for everything now. This is, uh, you know, this past week it was the National Day for Daughters, and then I was on Facebook, I think earlier, and it was there. Apparently, sometime last week there was also a National Day for Sons, and so I was able to get out there and put some information out there. But there's a National Day for almost anything now, and I think it's people's way of saying they want to be positive. Um, when they don't understand what's going on and there's all that negativity, it's another way to say, well, let's just have another national day where we could celebrate, which is what I was thinking about, baby boomers. I thought, well, here we are. Uh, let's take a few minutes to just digest and smell the roses of our generation as others can learn from your experience.
Things are changing with all this threats of war and everything. It's going to change everything dramatically. And like you said, you got to watch and really pay attention to prophecy to get a little bit of a feeling of what may happen. Because if we do, they just declared war just a few days ago now. United States has officially declared war. And so once this war's really come to a head with Iran and Russia and China and North Korea, and they're circling these countries and threatening nuclear bombs. So we don't know what the future holds, but we do know there is a Most High God somewhere watching down and is going to lead us in a direction that He wants us to go and save us from it ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And that, I think that's the best way to prepare to end our show today. And again, I thank you for sharing your personal story with us with regard to the things that, how your generation was affected and the things that your parents embarked upon that created the kind of life that you were able to have and the opportunities as a result of that. And I think that just shows how important it is for every generation to be able to see it from a larger perspective, step back and say, as a generation, what will our kids benefit? Because it's always been we want the next generation to do better.
And
Uh,
learn. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I appreciate that, and this has certainly been the way that I was hoping to fulfill this topic and conversation. So I again can't thank you enough. I'm just glad that I've got a chance to know you and to really hear more about your background. It gives us an opportunity to appreciate people in a way that we might not have because we just don't know and we don't take the time a lot of times to get to know people, get to know their story. But everybody has one.
Right. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed talking with you and look forward to future podcasts where we can get to know each other better and learn and grow from our experiences.
All right. If there's anything else, any other parting words you want for the Generation Xers, the Generation Zs, and the Alphas, these young ones that are coming up, anything you want to leave with them?
The only thing I want to add is we have to all keep the faith and trust that there's a Most High God that is going to lead us and guide us in a direction that's going to serve us, benefit us all.